Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. I'm just working around this runner bean plant and I'm pulling out any weeds that are growing underneath. Now, as gardeners, it's very easy to see these weeds as our enemy. But I actually want to show you that you can actually utilize them as a really precious resource. And in this video, I'm going to show you 5 amazing ways that weeds can help you grow bigger crops in your garden. So the first use is a permaculture principle you might have heard of. It's called chop and drop, and it's a very simple process. All you do is you get your weeds or perhaps leftover crop residue, and you either chop it up or you tear it apart into smaller pieces, which you then spread over the surface of your beds. And what this does is it adds fresh organic matter to the top. It's really going to help the microbes within the soil, so it's going to improve soil health. And rather than going into all of the effort of putting these weeds onto your compost bin, what you're actually doing is saving you that time and that effort and waiting for things to break down. You're just applying it directly to the surface of your bed. And it's one of the methods that I use when I'm actually putting beds to sleep at the end of the season. Now, if you live in a place that's quite slug prone, like where I am, what you want to do is just make sure that you always just apply quite a light covering of mulch over the top, because anything too thick could provide some habitat for slugs to hide under. Now, there's actually another method of chop and drop called chop, move and drop. So chop, move and drop is a really useful technique if you're relatively good at keeping your beds clear of weeds and you're wanting to add a bit of extra material into your growing space. So what I'm doing here is I've got all of these nettles and I'm just going to be chopping them up nice and fine. So they're going to be really small pieces, and then I'm going to sprinkle them over the growing area just to provide a little bit of extra organic matter and nutrition. The next thing you can do with weeds is a really simple way of making a liquid amendment, and it's simply by creating something called a weed soak. So I've got a bucket here, and all I'm doing is I'm along the side of the solar tunnel here, and I'm going to be collecting all of these weeds to put into this bucket. I'm just going to kind of scrunch them up a little bit and soak them with water. I've packed this bucket quite loosely with plant material, and I'm just going to cut it up ever so slightly, just so it sits down a bit more, like that. Now, the next thing you want to do for a weed soak is fill a bucket of your weeds with water. Now, you can either do this with something like a big rain barrel. I know a lot of people who will just put in a ton of nettles and cover it with water, and what happens with that is that over time all of the nutrients seep out of the nettles into the water, which you can then water your plants. Now, I try and follow inspiration from Korean natural farming, and one of the ways that you can make this even better is to inoculate it with some microbiology. Now, they recommend using stuff like leaf mold, but what I'm going to do is use a bit of this wood chip, put a couple of handfuls in like that, and I'm going to fill it up. And then the final thing is, when this is all nice and full, I'm just going to put a lid over the top, and I'm actually going to leave this for around 2 to 3 months. So it's really going to break down, and then I can use it as a concentrated feed, kind of 1 to 20 or 1 to 50 with water, to just water my plants as standard. Now, if you're just wanting to use something like nettles and you're putting those in a barrel, you can start using that with a dilution of 1 to 10 after just a week of letting the plant material sit. And as the water content goes down, you can simply refreshen it with more nettles and more water. Now, this nettle mixture will end up smelling quite a bit, but the plants aren't going to care. They're going to thrive from it. When it comes to growing perennials, for example, soft fruit, I've got a load of currant and gooseberry bushes here. Weeds are actually very useful. So you know that this grass around here is just growing up and around the stems. Well, instead of taking this grass away, I'm actually going to use it to my advantage to help prevent more grass growing by just placing it over the top like that. And if you can put enough grass on top, so it's like a nice thick mat layer, and leave a bit of space away from the stem for the stem to breathe, what it's going to do is, as it breaks down, it's going to create quite a nice mat or carpet, which is going to make it more difficult for the grass underneath to grow through. And another advantage, of course, is it's going to reduce evaporation, as well as providing nutrients as it breaks down. So it's a win-win situation. Instead of seeing it as the problem of grass growing up and around your plants, see it as a solution. Turn weeds into opportunities. There's a lot of ways in which plants are similar to humans, and one of them is that they need quite a nice balance and diversity and range of different nutrients to keep them healthy. And we all know that NPK is really important. So nitrogen is responsible for the leafy growth. Phosphorus is great for developing a healthy root system, and we all know that roots are the foundation of a healthy plant. And the other aspect, of course, is potassium, which is responsible for the flowers and for the fruits. Now, sometimes as gardeners, we're going to come across crops that might look a little unhealthy. These cucumbers here, they're not kind of that deep dark green that I'm looking for. And so what you can use is a really simple technique using organic brown sugar to create a fermented plant juice. And all these are concentrated liquid plant available amendments that we can make using crops that have, or plants and weeds that have specific minerals that we want. So if we have a plant deficiency, for example, a lack of phosphorus, and we can see that because sometimes the leaves at the bottom turn a bit purple, we can use dandelions, which contain a decent amount of phosphorus, to create a fermented plant juice that we're then going to drench and feed our plants with, either as a liquid feed for an instant boost of minerals and nutrients, or just as we water them, create a little bit of a habit of just adding those extra bits of goodness. So there's some amazing things I want to explore about fermented plant juices in the future, for example using carrot tops for calcium, and even using things like dill for potassium. But right now, if you want to find out more, and if you want to use perhaps the most amazing weed possible, which is nettles, which is what I'm watering these cucumbers with at the moment, then I really do recommend you check out this video here, because it's a ton to learn, but it's really very much going to offer huge potential for your gardening. And because these are shelf stable, you can create them this year to use next year. I think all of you knew that compost would make this list of 5. But in truth, even though compost is quite a simple thing that we forever talk about as gardeners, it is amazing. If you think of it, it's one of the 2 or 3 fundamentals of a healthy garden. And if you've got nothing else to do, then by all means prioritize making as much compost as possible, because honestly, compost can make the difference between a thriving garden versus a garden that is struggling. Now for me, I like to use a method of composting called lazy composting, and really there's only one rule you need to follow, and that is that you need to add as many different things as possible into your compost bin. So don't just put in, say, a load of nettles, put in a load of different weeds, put in all of your crop residues, put in things like newspaper, cardboard, as many different things as you can find, because the more elements that are put into it, the more balanced your final compost is going to be. Now, the other thing with creating your own compost is you just want to get into a bit of a habit where you set yourself a goal or a challenge of every single day, add a bit more to your compost pile. So it's always going to be gradually building up. Once you've finished up covering one of your piles, just put some cardboard over the top and leave it for about 8 to 12 months. And when it's doing that, it's a great opportunity to actually plant out your spare squash plants, any that are left over, so you can get an extra crop in the same area and make it more productive. So those are the 5 main uses that I have for weeds in this garden to help me grow bigger crops. And I think wherever possible, if there is a resource there and it's free, we can very much utilize it to help us increase the productivity of the garden. And also it's very satisfying, instead of going to a garden centre and buying feeds and extra bits of compost, to actually make our own and be more resilient as gardeners and have that security is a very empowering feeling that I'm trying to increase every single year.